Sudan doesn't exist in the way most people think countries exist. It's not on your Instagram feed. It's not a trending destination on YouTube. When was the last time someone said they were booking a flight to Khartoum? Exactly. The world has collectively decided Sudan is either too dangerous, too complicated, or too irrelevant to pay attention to. But here's the thing about places the world forgets. They keep living anyway. People wake up, drink tea, laugh with their neighbors, raise families, argue about politics, and build lives that are just as real as yours. And sometimes, those lives cost a fraction of what you're spending to survive in the West. $500 a month. That's the number we're testing in Sudan. Not as a poverty experiment, not as some performative minimalism stunt, but as a genuine attempt to understand what life actually looks like in a country that has been written off by most of the world. Can you live on that? Can you eat well, find decent housing, move around, and maybe even enjoy yourself? The answer is yes, but the more interesting question is, what does that life actually feel like? Because Sudan isn't just cheap. It is culturally dense in ways that will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about Muslim societies, hospitality, and what it means to be welcomed as a stranger. Most people's knowledge of Sudan comes from headlines about conflict, coups, or humanitarian crises. That's not entirely unfair. Sudan has been through a lot. Decades of civil war, international sanctions, political instability, and economic collapse. But that's not the full story. That's not even close. What those headlines miss is the texture of daily life. The way a shopkeeper will insist you take tea before discussing prices. The way neighborhoods come alive at sunset when the heat finally breaks. The way people survive, adapt, and somehow maintain a sense of humor despite everything. Sudan is not a tragedy. It's a place. And places are always more complicated than the stories we tell about them. So let's start from the beginning. Not the stereotypes, not the news reports, but the actual ground beneath your feet when you step off a plane in Khartoum. The air hits you first, dry, dusty, hot in a way that feels personal. The city sprawls in every direction without much of a plan, a mix of crumbling colonial architecture, modern concrete blocks, and makeshift markets that seem to appear out of nowhere. There's no skyline to speak of, no landmarks you'd recognize, just the Nile cutting through the center, dividing the city into sections that feel like different worlds depending on which side you're on. Sudan sits in northeast Africa wedged between Egypt to the north, Libya to the northwest, Chad to the west, the Central African Republic to the southwest, South Sudan to the south, Ethiopia to the south, east, and Eritrea and the Red Sea to the east. It's huge. The third largest country in Africa after Algeria and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, though it was even bigger before South Sudan split off in 2011. The Nile defines the country. Not just geographically, but culturally, economically, spiritually. The Blue Nile and the White Nile meet in Khartoum, a confluence that locals are quietly proud of, even if tourists rarely show up to see it. Most of Sudan is desert. The Sahara stretches across the northern half of the country, an endless expanse of sand and rock where temperatures regularly hit 120 degrees Fahrenheit in summer. The Sahel Belt cuts across the middle, a semi-arid transition zone where people have been herding livestock and farming for thousands of years. The south, before the split, was greener, more tropical, but that's gone now. What remains is a country that's mostly defined by heat, dust, and the constant negotiation with water, rivers, wells, seasonal rains. Water isn't background noise here. It's the main character. And then there's the history. Sudan wasn't always Sudan. Before the British and Egyptians carved it into colonial administrative units, this was the land of the Nubians, one of Africa's oldest civilizations. The Kingdom of Kush, which ruled from around 2500 BCE to 350 CE, built pyramids before Egypt's new kingdom was even a thing. That's not a metaphor. Sudan has more pyramids than Egypt. They're smaller, steeper, less famous, but they're there. Meroë, the ancient capital, sits in the desert a few hours north of Khartoum, and almost nobody visits. You can stand amongst 100 pyramids in near total silence, which is either eerie or magical depending on your mood. The fact that this site isn't swarming with tourists tells you everything about how the world sees Sudan. The population is diverse in ways that don't fit neatly into Western categories. There are over 500 ethnic groups, each with their own languages, customs, and histories. The largest groups are Arab and Nubian, but there are also Beya, Fur, Nuba, and dozens of others. Islam is the dominant religion, practiced by around 97% of the population, but even within that, there's variation. Sufi orders are influential, especially in rural areas, and their rituals involve music, dancing, and trance states that might surprise people who think Islam is monolithic. Christianity exists too, mostly among communities in the Nuba Mountains and among refugees from South Sudan. But it's a small minority now. Languages are layered. Arabic is official, but Sudanese Arabic is its own beast, influenced by local languages and nearly incomprehensible to someone who learned modern standard Arabic in a classroom. English is taught in schools, but outside of Khartoum's educated elite, you won't hear much of it. If you want to get by, you need basic Arabic phrases and a lot of patience with hand gestures. Daily life in Sudan operates on a rhythm that feels foreign if you're used to Western schedules. The day starts early, before sunrise, because that's when the air is coolest. People pray, drink tea, maybe eat something light. By mid-morning, the heat is already unbearable, and everything slows down. Shops stay open, but transactions take longer. Conversations stretch. The concept of rushing doesn't really exist. By midday, especially in summer, the city goes semi-dormant. People retreat indoors, nap, wait for the worst of the heat to pass. Life resumes in the late afternoon and evening, when the temperature drops and the streets fill up again. This isn't laziness. It's survival. You don't fight the desert. You adapt to it. Islam structures the day in visible ways. 5 daily prayers mark the hours, and you'll hear the call to prayer from mosques all over the city, overlapping and echoing in a way that's both chaotic and strangely soothing. Prayer isn't just a private ritual. It's public, communal, unapologetic. Men pray in mosques, on sidewalks, and shops. Women pray at home, mostly, though some mosques have separate sections for them. During Ramadan, the entire rhythm shifts. People fast from dawn to sunset, and the evenings become festivals of food, socializing, and worship. If you're not Muslim, you're still expected to respect the fast in public. Eating or drinking in front of someone whose fasting is considered rude at best, offensive at worst. Modesty is non-negotiable. For women, that means covering hair, arms, and legs in public. Many wear the hijab, some the niqab, a few the full abaya. Men are expected to dress modestly too, which usually means long pants and shirts with sleeves. Those standards are slightly more relaxed. This isn't about oppression, though Westerners often interpret it that way. For many Sudanese women, modest dress is tied to identity, faith, and respect. That doesn't mean there's no debate. Younger, urban women sometimes push boundaries, wearing brighter colors, tighter fits, or makeup that's more noticeable. But even then, the baseline is conservative, compared to what you'd see in Cairo, let alone New York. Family is everything, not in the vague, Hallmark card sense, but in the structural, logistical sense. Extended families live together or very close by. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. Everyone is involved in everyone's business, which can be suffocating or comforting depending on your personality. Decisions about marriage, work, and money are often family decisions, not individual ones. Privacy, as a concept, exists differently here. Your life is shared. Your struggles are shared. Your successes are shared. If you're used to Western individualism, this takes adjustment. But there's also a safety net built into this system. If you lose your job, your family absorbs you. If you're sick, they take care of you. There's no such thing as being completely alone. Hospitality is intense. If you're invited into someone's home, refusing is nearly impossible. You'll be offered tea, food. More tea, more food. They'll insist. You'll decline politely. They'll insist harder. Eventually, you'll give in because that's the script. This isn't performative. Sudanese hospitality comes from a deep cultural belief that guests are sacred, that feeding someone is both a duty and an honor. If you're a foreigner, this gets amplified. People are curious, eager to show you the best of their culture, and genuinely hurt if you seem uncomfortable or dismissive. So when we talk about living in Sudan on $500 a month, we're not just talking about money. We're talking about entering a system that operates on entirely different rules. The budget is real, but the experience is shaped by these rhythms, these values, these unspoken expectations. Let's break it down. Housing is where the biggest chunk of your budget goes, but it's also where you have the most options. In Khartoum, a basic one-bedroom apartment in a working-class neighborhood costs between $80 and $120 a month. That gets you concrete walls, a bathroom, maybe a small kitchen, and not much else. No air conditioning unless you install it yourself. No hot water unless there's a heater. Electricity is inconsistent, so you need to budget for a backup generator or just accept that some nights you'll be sitting in the dark. The quality is rough by Western standards, but it's functional. You have a roof, a door that locks, and space to sleep. If you're willing to live further from the center, prices drop even more. You can find rooms in shared houses for $50 to $70 a month. You'll have roommates, possibly a family, and less privacy, but the rent is low enough that you can spend money elsewhere. Utilities are separate and add another $20 to $30 a month depending on usage. Water is usually included, but electricity bills fluctuate wildly depending on whether the state grid is working or whether you're running on generator power, which burns diesel and gets expensive fast. Food is where Sudan becomes genuinely affordable. A kilogram of rice costs about 50 cents, a kilogram of lentils, maybe 70 cents. Fresh vegetables from local markets are dirt cheap. Tomatoes, onions, okra, eggplant, all available for pennies per kilo. Meat is pricier but still manageable. Chicken runs about $2 per kilo, beef closer to $4. Lamb is a luxury, reserved for special occasions, but even that's cheaper than what you'd pay in Europe or the US. If you're cooking at home, you can eat well for $60 to $80 a month. That's 3 solid meals a day, varied, nutritious, and filling. Street food is even cheaper and often better. A plate of fulmadames, the national breakfast dish, costs 20 to 30 cents. It's fava beans cooked with oil, cumin, and garlic served with flatbread. Simple, hearty, and surprisingly satisfying. Tamia, the Sudanese version of falafel, is another staple, crispy, spiced, served in bread with salad and tahini sauce. A sandwich costs maybe 15 cents. For lunch, you can get a plate of kisra, a thin fermented flatbread made from sorghum, served with stews or grilled meat, for around 50 cents to $1 depending on the toppings. Dinner might be the same, where you might grab shawarma from a street cart for $1 and change. Eating out at sit-down restaurants is more expensive but still affordable. A decent meal at a local spot costs $3 to $5. If you are going somewhere that caters to expats or wealthier Sudanese, expect $10 to $15. Those places have air conditioning, English menus, and food that's designed to appeal to foreign palates. But honestly, the best food is on the street or in someone's home. Restaurant food is fine, but it lacks the soul of what you get from a street vendor who has been making the same dish for 20 years, or a family meal where someone's grandmother is in the kitchen. Tea and coffee are central to Sudanese life, and they're cheap enough that you can indulge constantly. A cup of sweet, spiced tea from a street vendor costs 10 cents, maybe 15. Coffee is slightly more expensive, but still under 50 cents for a strong cardamom laced cup served in a tiny porcelain cup. The coffee ceremony is a whole thing. Beans are roasted, ground, and brewed in front of you, often by women who have perfected the ritual over decades. It's not fast, it's not meant to be. You sit, you talk, you drink 3 rounds of coffee, each one weaker than the last, and by the end, you spent an hour and maybe $1, and you feel like you've been part of something bigger than caffeine consumption. Transportation is a wild card. Buses and shared minivans are the cheapest option. A ride across Khartoum costs 10 to 20 cents. The vehicles are old, overcrowded, and run on no fixed schedule, but they get you where you need to go eventually. Taxis are more comfortable and faster, but they're also more expensive. A short trip might cost $1, a longer one $3 to $5. There's no Uber, no app-based system, so you negotiate every fare, which can be exhausting if you're not used to it. Tuk-tuks exist in some neighborhoods, and they're fun in a chaotic, wind-in-your-hair kind of way, but they're not particularly safe or comfortable. If you're staying in one neighborhood most of the time, you can walk. Khartoum isn't a walking city by design. Sidewalks are inconsistent, traffic is aggressive, and the heat makes long walks brutal. But short distances are manageable, and walking gives you a street-level view of daily life that you miss from inside a vehicle. You see the vendors, the kids playing, the men sitting in plastic chairs outside tea shops, the women shopping with cloth bags slung over their shoulders. You hear the sounds, the honking, the music from phone speakers, the call to prayer cutting through everything else. Entertainment is tricky because Sudan doesn't have a big formal entertainment industry. There are no movie theaters showing Hollywood blockbusters, no nightclubs or bars because alcohol is banned, no amusement parks or concert venues. Social life happens in homes, in tea shops, in markets. Along the Nile, people visit each other constantly. They sit, they talk, they eat, they drink tea, they watch soccer on old TVs. That's the entertainment. It's low cost but high contact. You can't really be anonymous here. If you're in a neighborhood for more than a week, people know you. They'll ask where you're from, why you're here, what you think of Sudan. Sometimes it's overwhelming. Sometimes it's the best part of the day. Internet is available, but inconsistent. Cafes and some homes have Wi-Fi, but speeds are slow, and outages are common. Streaming video is difficult unless you're patient. Social media works, but uploading anything larger than a photo takes forever. If you're working remotely, this is a real limitation. If you're just trying to stay in touch with people back home, it's frustrating but manageable. A monthly data plan for your phone costs around $5 to $10, which gives you enough to browse, message, and make occasional calls. But don't expect to binge Netflix or join Zoom meetings without buffering hell. So let's add it up. Rent, $100. Food, $80. Utilities, $25. Transportation, $30. Phone and internet, $10. That adds $1 to $145. You've got $1 to $155 left over for everything else: clothes, toiletries, occasional meals out, emergencies, maybe some savings. It's tight, but it works. You're not living lavishly, but you're not suffering either. You have a place to sleep, food in your stomach, and the ability to move around the city. That's more than a lot of people have anywhere. But here's the catch. This budget assumes you're living like a local. You're eating local food, shopping in local markets, living in local neighborhoods. If you try to maintain a Western lifestyle, eating imported foods, living in expat neighborhoods, taking taxis everywhere, the cost triples. Sudan is cheap if you adapt. If you don't, it's still cheaper than the West, but not by as much. Now let's talk about food culture beyond the budget. Because Sudanese food isn't just fuel, it's identity. Fulmadames isn't just breakfast, it's a statement. This is what we eat. This is how we start the day. This is what binds us. The dish itself is ancient, eaten across the Middle East and North Africa. But every country has its own version, and Sudanese food is distinct. The beans are cooked longer, until they're almost paste-like. The seasoning is heavier on cumin and garlic. The bread is different too. Sometimes it's baladi, a round flatbread, sometimes kisra, the sorghum crepe that's unique to Sudan. You eat it with your hands, tearing off pieces of bread, and scooping the beans, and there's a rhythm to it, a physical engagement with the meal that feels primal and satisfying. Kisra deserves its own paragraph. It's made from fermented sorghum flour, which gives it a slightly sour taste and a texture that is somewhere between a crepe and a thin pancake. It's usually served with a stew called mullah, which can be made from okra, dried fish, lamb, chicken, or vegetables, depending on the region and the season. The combination is earthy, tangy, filling. It doesn't look like much. Honestly, to Western eyes, it can look kind of gray and unappetizing. But once you try it, especially when it's made well, you understand why people eat it every day. It's comfort food in the truest sense. Stews are central to Sudanese cuisine. They're slow cooked, layered with spices, built around whatever ingredients are available. Peanut butter is a common base, which might sound strange, but it creates a rich, creamy sauce that coats meat and vegetables. Dried fish is used in some stews, adding a funky, umami depth that's polarizing. You either love it or you don't. There's no middle ground. Okra shows up a lot, cooked until it's almost slimy, which again is an acquired texture. But it's nutritious, cheap, and traditional, so it persists. Grilled meat is a treat. Skewers of lamb or beef, marinated in spices, cooked over charcoal until they're charred on the outside and tender inside. You get them from street vendors, served with bread, onions, and maybe a squeeze of lemon. They're simple, but they ray delicious in the way that grilled meat always is when it is cooked over open flame. There's also shawarma, which is more recent, imported from the Levant, but it's been adopted enthusiastically. Thinly sliced meat, usually chicken, wrapped in flatbread with vegetables and tahini sauce. It's fast, cheap, and satisfying, and it's become a go-to meal for people who are busy or broke. Sweets exist but aren't as prominent as in other Arab countries. There's basbousa, a semolina cake soaked in syrup, and belila, which is chickpeas cooked with sugar and spices, eaten as a dessert or snack. Dates are common, especially during Ramadan. Fresh fruit is more typical as a dessert, mangoes, guavas, watermelon, whatever's in season. It's sweet, refreshing, and fits the climate. The tea culture is what really defines daily life. Sudanese tea is strong, sweet, sometimes spiced with ginger or cinnamon. Served in small glasses, you drink it constantly, morning, afternoon, evening. Late at night, it's social glue. When you visit someone, the first thing they do is make tea. When you're negotiating a price at a market, the vendor offers you tea. When you're sitting with friends doing absolutely nothing, someone makes tea. It's ritual, hospitality, and habit all rolled into one. The glasses are tiny, so you drink multiple cups in a sitting and by the end, you're rewired on sugar and caffeine, but also deeply relaxed. Because the act of drinking tea is calming even when the tea itself is stimulating. Coffee ceremonies are less frequent but more formal. They happen in homes, usually hosted by women, and they follow a specific structure. Green coffee beans are roasted in a pan over charcoal. The smell fills the room, rich and earthy. Then the beans are ground by hand using a mortar and pestle. The grounds are boiled in a special pot called a jebina, and the coffee is poured from a height into small cups, creating a frothy top. You drink 3 rounds. The first is strong and bitter, the second is lighter, the third is almost weak. Each round has a name, a meaning, and you're expected to finish all 3. It's not something you rush. It's an event, a way of honoring guests, and a practice that connects modern Sudan to centuries of tradition. Food brings people together in ways that feel rare in the West. Meals are communal. You sit on the floor or on low stools around a shared plate, everyone eating with their right hand. Tearing bread, scooping stew, passing dishes. There's no separation between your plate and mine. We're all eating from the same plate, which feels intimate and vulnerable and weirdly trust-building. You're not just eating with someone, you're sharing food, literally, and that means something deeper. Now let's talk about women, because this is where things get complicated and where most outsiders get it wrong. Sudanese women are not oppressed in the way Western media likes to portray. That's not to say Sudan is a feminist paradise. It's not. Gender roles are conservative. Opportunities are limited, and legal systems favor men in marriage, divorce, and inheritance. But women are not passive victims. They're active participants in a society that's structured around family, faith, and tradition. And many of them defend those structures. Even when outsiders criticize them, education levels among women are rising. In cities, especially Khartoum, you'll find women who are doctors, teachers, engineers, business owners. They're educated, articulate, and aware of the world beyond Sudan's borders. They might wear hijab. They might follow conservative social codes. But they're not ignorant or powerless. The assumption that covering your hair means you lack agency is reductive. Many Sudanese women will tell you that modesty is empowering. that it allows them to be taken seriously for their intellect and character rather than their appearance. You don't have to agree with that, but you do have to respect it if you want to understand anything about this country. Social norms around gender are strict. Men and women don't mix freely in public. Social gatherings are often segregated. If you're invited to a wedding, men and women celebrate in separate spaces. Conversations between unrelated men and women are kept short and formal. Physical contact, even a handshake, is often avoided unless both parties are comfortable with it. This isn't hostility, it's respect as defined by local culture. If you're a foreign man, you need to be aware that staring at women, trying to start conversations, or acting overly friendly can be read as disrespectful or even threatening. Dating, as Westerners understand it, doesn't really exist. Relationships are oriented toward marriage, and marriage is a family affair. Parents are involved from the start. There might be conversations, meetings, negotiations about dowry, and living arrangements, and only after all that is agreed upon does a couple officially begin their relationship. That relationship happens in controlled settings, often with family members present, until the wedding. Premarital sex is taboo, legally risky, and socially devastating if discovered. Yes, some young people find ways around this. There are secret relationships, phone-based romances, and urban spaces where rules are bent, but those are exceptions, and they come with risk for foreign men hoping to date Sudanese women. The reality is bleak. If you're not Muslim, marriage is legally impossible unless you convert. Even if you convert, her family has to approve, and most families are not going to approve of a foreigner with no roots, no local connections, and a lifestyle that doesn't align with their values. Casual relationships are out of the question. So if you're coming to Sudan hoping for romance, you're in the wrong place. Weddings are where Sudanese culture really shows its colors, literally. The ceremony's last days involve hundreds of guests and are explosions of music, dancing, food, and celebration. Women dress in bright, elaborate gowns and spend hours on henna designs that cover their hands and feet. Men wear white, jalabias, traditional robes, and the whole event feels like a combination of religious ceremony and joyful chaos. Music is central, with drums, clapping, and call and response singing that goes on for hours. Even though Sudan is conservative, weddings are loud, physical, and exuberant. Women dance together, men dance together, and there's a joy in these moments that feels unfiltered. Eid celebrations are similarly intense. Eid al-Fitr, marking the end of Ramadan, and Eid al-Adha, the festival of sacrifice, are national events. People dress in new clothes, visit family, exchange gifts, and eat elaborate meals. Sheep and goats are slaughtered, and the meat is distributed among family, friends, and the poor. It's a reminder that Islam in Sudan isn't just about rules. It's also about community, generosity, and celebration. Sufi traditions add another layer. Sufism is mystical Islam, focused on direct experience of the divine through music, poetry, and dance. Sufi gatherings, called dhikr, involve rhythmic chanting, drumming, and sometimes trance-like states. It's intense, emotional, and very different from the sober, legalistic version of Islam that dominates media representations. In Sudan, Sufism is mainstream, especially in rural areas, and it coexists with more conservative interpretations without much conflict. Transportation is an adventure. The buses are ancient, cobbled together from spare parts, and they break down regularly. But they're also social spaces. You sit next to strangers, strike up conversations, share snacks, help each other with bags. There's a camaraderie in the shared misery of being crammed into a hot, slow-moving bus. Shared taxis are faster but chaotic. Drivers pack in as many passengers as possible, and you're often sitting with someone on your lap or half hanging out the door. It's uncomfortable and occasionally terrifying, but it's also the fastest way to get around if you're on a budget. The Nile is a transportation route too. Ferries cross between Khartoum, Omdurman, and Khartoum North. They're slow, rickety, and crowded, but the views are worth it. The Nile is wide and brown, flowing steadily between banks lined with trees, buildings, and markets, crossing at sunset. When the light turns everything gold, is one of the rare moments in Sudan that feels genuinely peaceful. Infrastructure is a constant issue. Power outages happen daily, sometimes multiple times a day. You plan your life around electricity. Charge your phone when the power's on, cook when the power's on, finish work when the power's on. When it goes out, you sit in the heat and wait. Internet is similar. It works, then it doesn't, then it works again. You learn not to rely on it. Water pressure is inconsistent, so people store water in tanks on their roofs. Roads are often unpaved, dusty in the dry season, muddy in the rains. Driving is aggressive, and traffic laws are more like suggestions. But people adapt. They complain, sure, but they adapt. Sudan's natural beauty is underrated. The Meroë Pyramids are stunning, especially at sunrise when the desert is cool and the light is soft. The Red Sea coast, near Port Sudan, has beaches and coral reefs that rival anything in Egypt or the Maldives, but almost nobody goes. There, the Nile itself is gorgeous, especially further south where it hasn't been choked by urban development. There are desert landscapes that stretch for miles without a single human structure, just sand, rock, and sky. It's harsh, but it's also mesmerizing. Markets are sensory overload. Colors, smells, sounds all hitting you at once. Vegetables piled high, spices in open sacks. Live chickens squawking in cages, vendors shouting prices, customers bargaining loudly. It's chaos, but it's functional chaos. You learn to navigate it, to find the vendors who give fair prices, to avoid the ones who see a foreigner and triple the cost. Markets are also social hubs. People catch up on gossip, check in on neighbors, exchange news. It's where the pulse of the community is most visible. Healthcare is a gamble. Public hospitals are understaffed, under-equipped, and overwhelmed. If you have a minor issue, you might be fine. If you have something serious, you're in trouble. Private clinics are better, but expensive relative to local incomes. Pharmacies are everywhere, and you can buy most medications over the counter without a prescription, which is convenient but also risky if you don't know what you're doing. Medical tourism to Egypt or Kenya is common for those who can afford it. For everyone else, you hope you don't get seriously sick. Education is valued but limited. Schools exist, but quality varies wildly. Wealthier families send their kids to private schools or international schools. Everyone else goes to public schools where classrooms are crowded, resources are scarce, and teachers are underpaid. University is an option for those who pass exams, but job prospects afterward are bleak. Many educated young people are unemployed or underemployed, which creates frustration and drives emigration. Safety is contextual. Khartoum is generally safe during the day. Violent crime is rare, though theft happens. Women traveling alone face harassment, not physical danger usually, but unwanted attention and comments. Certain neighborhoods are rougher, and there are areas you avoid after dark. Outside the capital, things get more complicated. Darfur, Blue Nile, South Kordofan, these regions have experienced conflict, displacement, and instability. Travelers are advised to stay away, and honestly, most do. Visa requirements are straightforward but annoying. You need an invitation letter from someone in Sudan or a sponsoring organization. The process takes time, and embassies can be difficult. Once you're in, you need to register with the police within 3 days. It's bureaucratic and tedious, but manageable. So would you live here? That's the question you're supposed to ask yourself when watching something like this. And the honest answer is, it depends on what you're running from and what you're looking for. Sudan is not easy. It's not comfortable. It's not Instagram friendly, but it's real. It's a place where people are surviving despite everything, where hospitality still means something, where $500 can actually get you through the month if you're willing to live simply. The budget works. You can eat, sleep, and move around on $500. But the bigger question is whether you can handle the isolation, the heat, the infrastructure failures, the cultural restrictions, the constant feeling of being watched and evaluated. Sudan demands adaptation. It doesn't bend to you. You bend to it. And if you can do that, if you can let go of your expectations and meet the place on its own terms, you might find something here that you didn't even know you were looking for. Comment 4 if you'd actually consider spending a month in Sudan. Comment 5 if you think $500 is too tight. Comment 6 if you're surprised Sudan has pyramids. Because the truth is, most of you didn't know half of what's in this script. Sudan has been written off, ignored, and misunderstood for so long that even basic facts about it feel like revelations. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the best places are the ones the world isn't paying attention to. Maybe the real travel experiences happen in the margins, in the countries that aren't trending, in the lives that don't make headlines. Sudan is one of those places, and if you're brave enough, or curious enough, or broke enough, it's waiting.